power that Ben Ruffino gave you from the AYS Black Book?
Nothing. Honestly, I'm not smart enough to read Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Okay.
I
Well,
will.
he gave you the exact location to Matt House's literal house in
Good.
Kansas City.
Good.
So I don't know, Carter. Is that where we're going? We could start there. Look, you had an interesting poll today about Durante Jones and Matt House. Tell the people what you learned from that today from the LSU fans.
Yeah, so it's about 50-50, right? On people that want Durante Jones and people that may want Matt House to be their next defensive coordinator. Is it going to be Matt House, the guy that coached Aaron Donald, coached Josh Allen, obviously both of them first round pass rushers. So you know what, Blake, I've sent you some of my numbers, some of the things that I look at whenever I evaluate a coach. And look, it's not great. Like there's just no other way for me to cut it. And then when I actually dove a little bit deeper, and I'll talk about this. I can't get too deep because it'll take an hour. But this is what really fascinated me: Blake, Jameson, Rodriguez, Theodore
Hey,
the
hey,
third,
don't
or
get hey,
nine.
give me the Italian names. Call me like Genovese, like the Genovese crime family. Give me a Genovese in there.
Look, this is the truth about coordinators, right? I saw someone reply on your Twitter earlier that I would rather go with the sure thing instead of go with Durante Jones, who is more of a gamble. Well, all coordinators are gambles,
Right.
like especially at the college level. I mean, there's just so much differentiation from job to job and what you have to do. I will say this: I read an article about part of the reason why Matt House, for those that don't know, was the defensive coordinator at Kentucky. Then he leaves to take a lesser job in the NFL as a linebackers coach. Part of the reason why he did that, Blake, if you read between the tea leaves, is recruiting, right? And that's the thing, you always heard about that with Joe Brady. Well, Joe Brady didn't like to recruit. Well, that may or may not be true. There probably is some truth into that. But this looked kind of like a situation where Matt House, after his best year as a defensive coordinator in 2018, just really like recruiting. And you look at someone, Mark Stoops, he referenced that in an interview, right? And that's a big no-go for a lot of people. Now, for me, I don't think coordinators being great recruits being great recruiters is as important as some people make it out to be. I want my coordinator to mostly focus on the schematics of things. But still, that is something else that I found to be very interesting. So honestly, Blake, I'm not on fire about Matt House. I don't want anyone to take my poll from earlier today as me being unbelievably pro Durante. There's a lot of questions about Durante as well. But the Matt House thing, I understand that a lot of people love that he was thought of for the Auburn job and the Tennessee job. But that doesn't mean anything. He didn't take the job, right? Just because you're interviewed or you're offered doesn't mean you're actually going to be good at that job. So there's a lot of red flags when it comes to House from my vantage point.
Carter, I once had an interview with Warren Buffett's company. So
Oh, really?
does that go on my resume? I mean, like, like, hey, I know the financial game. Do I put that on the resume? And I think you bring up a good point there. Just because you turn a job down doesn't really mean anything unless it's like a head coaching position, right? Meaning like
Right.
a Billy Napier. Like that's something, Carter, that's different. And I think we know that. But from a coordinator perspective, does it really? Now, I get maybe, because like, for example, Billy Nate, I'll give him Auburn. I won't give him Tennessee. And here's only the reason why. Is maybe because we saw Billy Napier turn it down, and I think that there were some control issues there. But
Right.
regardless, it doesn't really matter that you got the interview. Carter, I will say this about Matt House, and I'll kick this to you because I know that you kind of crunched the numbers. I don't care that he's about recruiting because look at Dave Aranda, right? Like, God bless his soul. He's just not a good recruit. He's a good recruiter. He's not a great recruiter. He's not an Orgeron, right? Like, he's not a 24/7 recruiter. But Carter, I don't know if I necessarily need that. But he did have some issues while in the SEC. It's like I started breaking down some 2018 film, and Carter, some of the things he was calling was a little suspect. Now, does that have to do with personnel? I don't know, but what do you see from a Matt House?
Yeah. Okay. So this is what
on the field, I mean, but
Okay. So this is what I normally do whenever I break down a candidate, right? And Blake, you watch our channel. If people have seen my film breakdowns, the first thing I like to do is just run a raw number report. And I look at two basic stats. So there's obviously more advanced stats like EPA per play. There's all these advanced stats, right? But I like to keep it basic because, look, I don't fully understand EPA per play. And at the same time, we can all understand yards per play and yards per attempt. And I do it on both sides of the ball, right? So when I look at a defensive coordinator candidate, there's two stats that I look at, right? I look at yards per play given up and yards per attempt. And I just locked my phone again. I actually have it pulled up right here that Matt House, his defenses on a yards per play basis wasn't ever really that good outside of 1 year, 2018, his last year at Kentucky. And that was a year that he had 3 defensive players that went into the draft as top 3 round draft picks.
Josh Allen being one of them.
Mike Edwards, a safety, and there was another safety. And they were just good. They were a really good defense. Now, I reached out to a few people that I trust in the coaching community. Also in 2018, guess who joined the staff? The guy that LSU tried to get to be their defensive coordinator, Brad White. So I reached out to a few people that I trust once again, and they said that Brad White had more to do with that 2018 defense than it led on, which is why it was such a big thing. So you dive a little deeper on Matt House, and I looked at his 2017 Kentucky numbers. Blake, they were horrible. They were an awful defense, okay? Outside of the top 100 yards per play, they were 13th in the SEC. Even if you Power 5 adjust those numbers, it actually looks a lot worse. And then you go down to his other 3 years when he was a defensive coordinator at Florida International, Pitt in 2014, and then in Pitt in 2013. Now, full disclosure, one of those Pitt defenses had the best defensive player I think I've ever seen in Aaron Donald. And despite that, his defenses were outside of the top 60 in both of those years in yards per play, and they were outside of the top 9 in the ACC when you Power 5 adjust those numbers. So to simplify that, it's not good. It's not good. It's not the absolute worst, but let's put it this way. In his 5 seasons he's been a defensive coordinator, Matt House fielded an elite defense once, his final year at Kentucky. But here's the kicker, Blake. This is the big, big kicker, all right? And I'll touch on this a little bit further on my channel, but I want to share it with your lovely audience as well. Matt House had one major thing that was going in his favor, which is pace of play. So Pittsburgh's defense was outside of the top 60 in yards per play, right? And this is why you have to use yards per play instead of total yards, because Pitt played at an extremely slow pace. Matt House's defenses was top 10 in all of college football in fewest plays per game. So it's just simple logic here. Matt House, his yards per play numbers weren't all that good, while at the same time, Pitt played at a very favorable pace. And the same thing was true when he was at Kentucky, when he was alongside Mark Stoops, who also played at a slower pace. So what does that tell you? That's huge for a defensive coordinator because it gives you more time. You don't have to call plays as quickly. It gives your guys more time to rest. Your depth doesn't have to be as good. Now, the good thing is Brian Kelly doesn't play at the absolute fastest pace at either. And at the same time, Matt House is an extremely talented candidate. The Chiefs bought out the final $150,000 of his contract at Kentucky to get him into Kansas City. I'm just saying that there's a lot of red flags here, Blake.
I don't disagree with that, Carter. I actually agree with you on that. It makes me a little nervous. And even, Carter, see, and look, there's two kinds of people in what we do. You're more of a statistical guy. I'm more of the I want to see with my eyes guy, right? Carter, and look, I will use stats, don't get me wrong, to make my point validated. But man, like, you had a ferocious front seven, and your yards per play in 18 were pretty bad at times. Like, I'm sitting here looking at the schedule. Yes, you beat Florida, but they also have a lot of turnovers. Yes, you created them, but you're getting beat by Tennessee. You're getting beat by a very suspect Georgia team.
Right.
I mean, look, the question is, Carter, I think of the ultimate thing, what happens if he has LSU type of athletes on all three levels? That's something that we always have to counter in here, but I think it'll be interesting. Now, the other candidate on the offensive side has been Mike Denbrock. Now, I will tell you this. I understand that a lot of people don't know Mike Denbrock, but let me tell you, Carter, because I said this last night, and I'll throw it to you because we've talked about him. I watched the Cincinnati game versus Notre Dame this year, and I'm going to be honest. The Spider 2Y banana on the goal line was perfecto, okay? Brother, he calls a damn good game.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, Carter, it got me chills when I'm thinking, like, shit, that man's going to be an offensive coordinator. Because it was really interesting how he was mixing things up. But the stats also align there, not giving everything, not giving the whole recipe of this spaghetti.
Right.
But what did you see, or what are you seeing from Mike Denbrock of why he could be a good candidate?
Yeah, so I actually ran the yards per play and yard per, adjusted Power 5 numbers. They're all really good. I was really impressed, honestly. Look, so his Cincinnati tenure, Desmond Ritter's been his starting quarterback all 4 years. Obviously, Ritter is phenomenal. But at the same time, it's not as if Cincinnati's had, this Jamar Chase on the outside. They've had good receivers. They've had good running backs. They have a few wide receivers and running backs that are going to get drafted. But once again, they didn't have, a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They're back this year as a transfer from Bama. That's a superstar for them. And, he's a really good football player. But really outside of that, not anyone that's just unreal. That's like an NFL all-pro level guy. So what he's done at Cincinnati is really impressive. He had a very rough first year in 2017. I'm always very sympathetic to first-year coordinators, especially offensive coordinators. But these last 4 years of Cincinnati have been phenomenal. Now, I will say, when they've played Power 5 competition, their numbers haven't been as good. But then again, you're Cincinnati. You're not going to have as much talent when you play a Power 5 team. So in other words, Cincinnati has just come out and just dominated teams. Now, obviously, the Notre Dame tenure was also really good. Notre Dame's 2015 offense was their best. And Denbrock was the one calling the shots, like the best that Brian Kelly had. Better than the Denbrock offenses. And they had a quarterback go down. Deshaun Kaiser stepped in. If you've watched Deshaun Kaiser, and look, Deshaun Kaiser in the NFL hasn't torn it up. He's not great. And Denbrock got him drafted in the second round. And look, they had Will Fuller. They had Mike McGlinchey in that 2015 offense. They had Quentin Nelson in a backup role. So their offensive line really carried them. But at the same time, Denbrock, 7 yards per play. That's the magical number. When you hit 7 yards per play, that is a national championship caliber offense. Even when you Power 5 adjust his Notre Dame numbers, they're really good. Now, here's a big thing, Blake. In 2016, they went 4-8, and Denbrock essentially got fired. But what happened? Reached out to a Notre Dame insider, Brian Driscoll. He's absolutely
Same.
phenomenal.
Brought him
And
on the show. Same.
and he told me that Brian Kelly made the decision to give Mike Sanford, a young offensive coordinator, the opportunity to have more say in how the offense ran. And honestly, Blake, this is what's really interesting about that. They were still decent. Like, they were still a top 50 offense, and they were better even when you adjusted Power 5. So Denbrock's really good. There's no other way around it. I know it's not a sexy name. I know he's not young. Mike is the most basic name of all time. Denbrock, Denbrock doesn't roll off the tongue well, and it does seem like a nepotism hire. It does have some Les Miles, Cam Cameron-ish vibes to it, hiring your good old buddy Denbrock to come back. But Blake, there's no other way around it, man. I mean, look, let me ask you this, Blake. Do you think Desmond Ridder is like going to go to the NFL and be like even Tyler Huntley good or Taylor Heineke good? You don't think so?
Gardner Minshew good? No.
So there you go.
No,
I don't think so either. I don't either. So you give Denbrock a lot of credit.
Here's what I think about Denbrock and Carter, because Mark brings this up. He says if these two shows combine, fire emoji. And I think that we're a good yin and yang. I think what I see from that statistical aspect and what he did, look, and Brian Kelly said that it was his biggest regret, by the way. Like, talking to people around Notre Dame, like letting go of Mike Denbrock was one of his biggest mistakes. Okay. Like, he's been on record in saying that. I also look at that 4-8 season and look at this. Of the 8 losses, 7 of them were to ranked teams within a 1-score game. So I kind of sit back and say, not all 4-8 seasons are the same, right? Like, they're never winning and losing seasons. So Carter, they only have 1 loss this year. It's not the same because they only played 1 ranked team and they lost to it. And they were about to go into the playoff. They go 4-8, but they lose to 7 teams. 3 of them were in the top 5. So no, I don't freak out about that. But what I see on film from Mike Denbrock is, Carter, quite honestly, and I'll say it because it's my show, you better get your shit together. Because if you put too many in the box, he's going to start hitting you through the air. If you back off, he's going to go pistol. We're going to go power game. And I got to be honest, I literally did get chills in that Notre Dame game. Like, get going from the pistol and look like the zone read, but the power behind it, Carter.
Yeah.
Wanting the power. Like, that kind of stuff to me gets me, like, I hate to even say this, but emotional. I get emotional, Carter.
Right.
He calls a great game. You know who he is. He knows the spread offense, but he's a little bit more, and I hate to say it like this, he's a better Steve Ensminger in a way. Like, that's kind of how
I could see
I looked at it from the age, knows the spread offense a little bit better. And look, if you do, the first play from scrimmage, Carter, was a pistol. They had 4 wides. They had the receiver on the line of scrimmage. They were outside the numbers, and they had the 2 wide receivers right behind them. All right, they had they had a corner and a safety and another safety here. They had a corner and a safety playing deep. Quarterback knew, throw it right, 11 yards. They went all the way down the field doing those kind of concepts, and that's a part of the game plan that I'm like, oh, my God. Feed me, Big Daddy. That's like what I kept saying. So I like it a lot, and I'm really excited. Now, Carter, I want to kick into this. So we talked about coordinators, but the one thing that I don't think, and you're the only guest that I feel like I can bring in here and talk about this in a very good way. The one thing that I think that everybody is missing here is Brian Kelly. Like, we're talking about the coordinators, we're talking about staff members and everything else, and we just kind of put Brian Kelly on the back burner. Carter, last time he was at Cincinnati and when he called plays, he was a pretty damn good offensive coordinator. How do you feel about that from an offensive side of things with Brian Kelly being there too?
Yeah, so I think what BK is most excited about, and he won't publicly say this, is that he's going to get to work with some higher quality quarterbacks, right? I'll go back to this. I mean, Ian Book, doesn't set the world on fire for me. Deshaun Kaiser doesn't set the world on fire for me. I mean, we're talking about NFL clipboard holders. Obviously, Walker Howard has a higher ceiling than those guys. You can argue Garrett Nussmeier might have a higher ceiling if things happen the way that they need to happen for him to be the guy that he wants to be. And then, of course, Miles Brennan, obviously, is someone that Brian Kelly thinks highly of to convince him to come back. Now, I will also say this is going to be the biggest thing for Brian Kelly. And I understand that there's so much surrounding BK. Who are the coordinators going to be? And what about recruiting and this off the field stuff, family or whatever? All that stuff doesn't matter, right? It really doesn't. The biggest red flag surrounding Brian Kelly for me is these playoff performances, right? I don't care if you get blown out by Alabama. I mean, it's going to happen, right? Especially that 2020 Bama team. The thing that should concern you are those blowout losses to Clemson in big spots, right? At least be a little bit more competitive in those games, right? And that's the thing. Brian Kelly, you're not going to see, to me, I don't think we're going to see the Les Miles and Ed Orgeron. How in the F did we lose to those guys kind of losses? BK's really good at beating who he needs to beat. He's overall really good between the headsets as far as decision-making is concerned. But at the same time, when he goes mano-a-mano against the Dabos and the Knicks, yes, he's going to have better talent. But when he was at Notre Dame, he had fine enough talent to make those games slobber knockers at the very least. And that's going to be the thing. Will he be able to devise a game plan to get us over the top to beat those teams, especially in these first couple of seasons where those teams are going to be more talented and deeper than we're going to be just based on raw recruiting rankings? Now, that's not me saying that LSU's not going to be talented enough. It's just in order to beat those teams, you have to be special.
And you got to stay healthy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because of those numbers, right?
Yes. So that's going to be the big thing. That's the thing that's in the back of this big noggin of mine, right? Can he actually get it done? And, that's the reason. That's, obviously money's the reason why he partially took this LSU job.
Right.
But Brian Kelly's got a lot of money, right? He came here to win a national championship. And that's going to be the thing. When he's been between the headsets, when he's going up against these elite teams, does he have a high enough ceiling? Because Blake, some coaches quite simply don't. And that's going to be, BK's magnum opus. Can he actually get over the top?
I like that word. Say it again.
Magnum opus. I don't know if I used it correctly there.
I'm going to look that up. You best believe magnum opus. You know what the only thing for me, Carter, is he's never had a Keyshawn Boutte.
Right.
So, I talked to an offensive lineman's parent today, okay? And I asked him one question. I'm like, what does he learn from Brian? What does your son learn from Brian Kelly in 3 weeks? He goes, Blake, he's learned more about with him and Brad Davis and what they're doing offensively in 3 weeks than what he's learned his entire – I'm not going to say his entire tenure at LSU, right? And so,
yeah,
I look at this and I know that he's the X's and O's guy, and he just hasn't had the Jimmys and Joes. And look, I'm fired up about it. Carter, last one, and we'll get you out of here. And we got a super chat. Okay, I'll send you half of this.
No, don't. It's all yours.
Danny Girl, $4.99. She says, asks the power, do I get attendance credit for tonight's live? Watching you on AYS, is there a realistic, good DC option other than sticking with Durante? Now, I'll say this. I'm not – if Durante stays, I'm okay with it, but the floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, so shout out to Danielle. Every time she's in the chat, she gets hit on. Like every time, and she takes it like a champ. And I asked her, "Do you want me to block these thirsty dudes coming after you?" And she's like, she laughs it off. Like she's one of the funniest commenters on the planet, and it's real. It's
I'm not laughing at Danielle for getting hit on. It was just like, like, bro, I knew where it was going,
dude. Every time.
Dude, I have
people love them for Danielle. Oh, Danny girl. Huh?
Dude,
Huh?
I literally have female watchers or women that watch the show, and they'll comment and they'll send me like, Blake, so and so's hitting on me, and I'm like, oh my god. So Daniel, that's why I'm laughing. But Carter,
yeah, she takes it the best. So this is key right here. It's the timeline, right? You see, there you go, Pooh Bear right there. Going ahead, take your shots, man. Ha ha ha. No, this is it, right? I don't know. That's the kind of scary thing. And with the way that the college football calendar works now, with the early signing period being the way that it is, with staffs turning itself out the way that they are now, it's really hard, right? And this is going to sound wild, but a lot of you know more about what's happened with LSU football than Brian Kelly has over the past 5 years, simply because there's a gazillion different things this guy's had to do. Hey, there you go, little munchkin.
Hey, he was the one sending you the. Hey, can you tell Carter what you sent him earlier? Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Who's going to be the next offensive coordinator at LSU? I'm the one. Go find your mama, boy.
I love it, man.
Bye-bye.
But
Did
no,
you hear what he said? He said, I can't tell you.
I can't.
Man, oh, God. That's the Italiana in him. That's the Genovese family.
And there you go. I like the booger band on the right wrist. I like it.
Oh, brother, I don't take this off. Come on,
it's a beautiful wristband, baby. So, this is it, right? There you go, and you still got it. Look at that. Jerry Stovall.
Oh, it's right here on my monitor the whole time.
It should be. That's an on-card auto. Man, that was one of my favorites, but I was like, Blake deserves this. He really does. I love his show. So this is key, right? With the way that the timeline works. Now, full disclosure, I want everyone to know that if Matt House is hired, I'm going to support him all out, right? Look, he's coached Tyrann Mathieu, even though it's not his position group. He's probably learned a thing or two from having that guy on his defense, right? So, I'm going to be a Matt House supporter if he even is a guy, even though I'm really skeptical. And whatever you say, Blake, whatever I say, we want this team to win. We just want to be great again, right? So this is a key thing right here as far as the defensive coordinator. It's going to be so hard to poach someone away, especially if they're still in the playoff. So right now, I can't just think of another name because so many of these defensive coordinator hires now. Let me put it this way, Blake. The last 3 names that have been attached to the LSU defensive coordinator job were all position coaches in the NFL within like a 2 or 3 year window, right? So Brad White has been the defensive coordinator for Kentucky, but right before that, he was a position coach in the NFL. Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Durante Jones was a position coach in the NFL. Ryan Nielsen was a position coach in the NFL. So there's so much variance when it comes to actually who's taking these jobs. And the second thing that's very key to keep in mind is the offensive side of the ball is so much more important than the defensive side of the ball, right? The college football playoff numbers back that up as well when it comes to yards per play. So it's not as important as getting the offensive coordinator hire right. And as you guys could tell, Mike Denbrock is like top 2 or 3 for me right now. Matt House is not anywhere near. I would not be thrilled about it. So I will say this: I would think I would prefer Durante at this point. There are some questions that would like to be answered as far as what actually happened last year. But yeah, Daniel, I can't just think of anyone right now, Blake, that would leave where they are now to come to LSU.
You throw mad stacks at somebody, though, Carter. I mean, it just
Yeah.
it all depends. And look, this whole Pete Golding nonsense, like their camp's telling me they hadn't even been contacted. So, I'm tired of hearing this whole Pete Golding shit too.
Right.
Carter, the power, Bryant, my brother, you're fantastic.
Yeah.
And I know that everybody knows where to catch all your shows, but tell everybody where they can catch you. And we appreciate everything you did here tonight.
Yeah, Power Hour LSU. We're doing a live stream a little bit later tonight. I'm very lucky to have friends like you, Blake. Even though we do all these Twitter spaces and you'll be on my live stream here in a few weeks. I just started doing guests. I just started figuring that out. And
tell them you had the Jeremy Hill on.
Man, I couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe like he even watched like my channel. It was crazy. And he was super high. His Tom Brady stories were just so great. But
I bet.
But yeah, I mean, Jay Hill's great. I mean, we have Van Lathan coming up. And he just won an Oscar, which is crazy. And you'll be on there pretty soon as well, Blake. So yeah, I'm blessed, man. Get to do the film studies, get to do the stat breakdowns and all that stuff. And my favorite thing, I got a text from a few people. Blake shouted you out on AYS. And I'm like, God, it's cool because I actually do like your tweets. I love your Twitter spaces. You cover all these different LSU related stuff while also raising a family, while also rushing to go see Spider-Man in a theater full of neck breathers and guys wearing socks and sandals and guys wearing Hawaiian shirts. You can't deny that, man. I was shocked that you went, man. You probably had to sit between a guy named Ralph and Bubba. Your family's got to sit in 3 different splotches if you didn't show up 5 hours early for the movie. And was it good? Don't give me any spoilers because I am going to go see it. But like, as a rational person, I'm actually going to wait and just wait a week when I could just go there in an empty theater.
Well, first off, the mouth breathers are just as funny as the movie is. Like it to me, it's just as much of an experience to hear, oh my God, Seth, look, it's Voldemort. You know, like that to me is just more entertaining than anything else. Like, I'll give you a quick story, Carter.
Go ahead.
So I'm in the movie theater watching Endgame, right?
Right.
And if you hadn't seen Endgame now, I mean, I can't. You have to have watched it, so I'm not spoiling anything. So you remember when the portals opened and everybody started walking through the portals, right?
Dun dun da da.
Right, and so when what's his name? The Black Panther walks through, and they start singing in Bombay. This whole row behind me of nothing but 1992 nerds were like clapping their hands and stomping their feet in Bombay. So that to me is worth the $16 ticket of admission. So I'm perfectly okay with these dudes. And look, I'm the only dude in there with a woman. Swear to God, hand on the Bible, the only man in there with a wife. And it's kind of freaky, you know, but at the same time, it's kind of cool. But nevertheless, we got off on a tangent. Either way, I thought it was fantastic. I am a Marvel nerd in my own right. I am also during the holidays going through. I'm watching every single one from start to finish in chronological order.
Oh my God.
And if you think I'm a nerd, you know what? It's my time. It's my life, Carter. It's my life.
You do you. Go right on ahead. I'm a nerd too, man. As you can tell, I'm a sports collecting nerd, right? I had a viewer send me this Tyrann Mathieu printing plate card, and I cried when I got this.
All right,
that's how big of a nerd I am. I cried when someone sent me a printing plate because this is a plate that they actually print the cards on.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, so this is one of Tyrann Mathieu's printing plates, and somebody just sent it to me, and they're valuable. They're one of ones. They're the only ones in existence. So yeah, I'm a nerd too. Just this is just a sport, but yeah, Blake, I appreciate.
You're doing a show tonight. I will be live up in there, asking many as questions as I can. You best believe it. But Carter, thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
Let's go.
Let's go.